7 o'clock.
We'd like to welcome you to Planting Trees and Shrubs in New York State. And our guest presenter is Mike Mahanna. He's a member of the Master Gardener program, and he's also a certified New York State arborist. He's a landscaper and greenhouse manager, and we will enjoy hearing his presentation tonight. And if you could put your questions and answers in the question and answer spot, and he will answer them at the end of the presentation tonight. And please mute, and you can turn off your videos too. That will help with bandwidth tonight. And we also have Linda Wimmer, she's a Master Gardener volunteer, and she's also our receptionist who answers the front desk phone when you call, and she helps answer questions too. We thank her for helping out tonight. Okay, Mike, and I'll stop share this.
All right. Okay, welcome folks. I'm going to put my presentation on here. Okay, did it come up, Holly?
Not yet.
Okay, let me go back to share content screen. Okay, one more try. Do you see it now?
Not yet. Hang in there, everybody. We had it up there before. We'll get oh boy, I'm telling you. We need
okay.
people around here. So what did you do last time? Holly, you told him what to do. Can you guide him again?
Screen, microphone on. Okay, one more try here.
It almost looked like it was loading when you did it. Okay.
Do you see it yet?
I still see Mike Mahanna, but nothing else.
One. Okay, so back to Zoom.
Holly, are you right there?
Screen. Start broadcast. Okay, I think we have it now.
Yes, that's what she said, starting the broadcast. There you go. Okay. Yes, that's exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, here it comes.
Are we up?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so when Holly mentioned this topic about planting techniques of trees and shrubs and some possible native trees and shrubs to plant in our area. So, you know, obviously, you know, the planting is the most important. You can pick out a tree, you can pick out a shrub, but if it's not planted correctly, it's not going to, you know, thrive and survive. So we're going to talk a little bit, actually a lot about planting the different types of trees and shrubs, whether it's container, ball and burlap, or bare root. So myself, I've had a long love affair of getting my hands dirty. As you can see, started at a young age. I can't resist putting this picture in. But the one thing that is most important is our plant hardiness zone. So this is the hardiness zone map. So we're roughly the dark green in the center of the map in New York State, which plants will survive in zone 5 to -20. So when you do buy a tree or shrub, most shrubs, not a lot of trees will come with a plant label, but most shrubs do come with a plant label, and that label is going to give you all the information you need to be successful with that plant. So the label says exposure, full sun. So now if you're planting this in the shade of your perennial garden as a feature plant, it's not going to do well. It'll survive, but it won't thrive. It'll be thin. and leggy, and it won't look like the picture on the label. So what full sun is at least 6 hours of direct sunlight. So to reach that full sun exposure, you need at least 6 hours of complete sunlight. And then it'll tell us our spacing 4 to 5 feet apart. So if we want to put a hedge in, so we're going to separate that hedge on center, the shrubs, at about 4 to 5 feet. And as they grow and mature, so it says this plant average height and width, 15 feet tall by 5 feet wide. So that'll give you your spacing. Fertilizing requirements, again, hardiness zone. So this is hardy to zone 3, and we're a zone 5. So it's very well suited for our area. And then it's water use. Keep moist until well established. Then water regularly as needed. Now, juniper is a drought tolerant plant, so it doesn't need a ton of water after it establishes itself. Okay, so we'll talk first about bald and burlapped trees, and larger shrubs will also come bald and burlapped. So what that means is they'll dig these plants with a tree spade and spade them into these wire baskets lined with burlap. Then we'll talk about containerized trees. This is a pot and pot nursery outside of Syracuse that a friend of mine runs. So basically they'll grow a pot inside of a pot with drip irrigation to each container. Then when that tree matures, they can pop it out of the pot and put another one right in there. So there's very little working of the land. And then we'll talk about bare root plants. So bald and burlapped. So, the thing with bald and burlap trees is, and I always explain to people that, so for instance, when this oak tree was dug out of the nursery, the root system extends 2/3 past the drip line. So what I mean by the drip line is to the edges of the branches of the tree. So if you took a line, if you went out to the edge of this tree, took a line straight down to the ground, the roots will come out that far, plus 2/3 past the drip line. So when they ball and burlap a tree of this size out of the nursery, you're leaving a lot of the root system behind. So it's going to take a couple years for a tree of this size to develop those new fine hairy roots that it really needs to maximize its growth potential. Because the fine hairy roots are the roots that are taking in the water and the nutrients. The big roots, 1.5 to 2-inch diameter, those are storage and anchor roots. So you really, when you're buying a tree like this, yes, you're buying a big tree, but you're leaving a lot of the root system behind that has to be regenerated. So here's a locust tree that was growing bald and burlapped in a nursery, and what they do is they heal mulch around them while they're in the nursery to keep the balls moist. But you can see the root system just busting out of that bald and burlap base of that tree. You can just take a lopper, and prune these back, because again, what you really want are those fine hairy roots. Fine hairy roots that you see. So this is a bald and burlapped white pine that we had planted. This one was in the nursery for a while, and the burlap started to break down, but it's still in the basket. But you can see some of the white fine roots coming out of the ball, which is a good sign. So we removed the basket. It's very important to remove the wire basket, because if you don't remove the basket, it's going to impede the growth of the root system. The root system can spread out a lot easier without that wire basket around it. This is actually a evergreen that we removed from a yard, and it wasn't that big, but they never took the wire basket off. And actually, we are hooked onto the basket with the backhoe, with one of the teeth on the backhoe. And you can see where the root system never really busted out for the age of the tree. This tree was probably in the ground for 12 or 15 years, and I was able just to pop that ball and burlapped, or the balled root system, right out. So again, if you remove the wire basket, that root system can spread out without being impeded. And here's the white pine after we took the wire basket off, and you can see all the nice white root hairs, and those are the roots that you want. They take up the water and the nutrients. And I always like to lay down some plywood and put the dirt on the plywood, because it's kind of a pain in the butt to rake it out of the grass. So you use a flat shovel. It's easy to scoop off the plywood and throw back in the hole. It makes for a nice, neater, cleaner planting site. Plus, I'll leave it twined. The evergreens, I like to twine them and leave them tied up when we're planting, so they don't get in the way, and you can see the whole planting hole and get it planted to a proper depth. Now, a lot of times when you're buying balled and burlapped, what they'll do is they'll fold the burlap on top of the ball, the root ball, so you really cannot see the root flare. So you're going to pull that burlap off, and you want to expose the root flare. So you can see at the bottom of this trunk, those were actually two branches that were covered in dirt. So what we did is we cleaned around, we scraped it down to the bottom of the root flare, and you want that area level with your ground. You'd rather plant the tree a little bit too high than a little bit too low, because you're going to get a little bit of settling in the newly planted tree hole. So you always want to make sure that the root flare is just above ground level. Because if you do plant a tree too deep, what's going to happen is those roots are so far down into the soil that they'll end up getting suffocated. And now you throw mulch on top of it, and it's a slow death, basically, because those roots aren't close enough to the surface to get oxygen. Because plants, plants are living things also. They also need oxygen to survive. So we'll talk about containerized trees. Now these are 30-gallon containers, and they're pretty good size. I prefer, if I can, and depending on the client's needs, I prefer containerized. And the only reason being is that you're getting all the roots that you're paying for. And that tree is going to have its whole root system intact. And when you put it into the landscape, it's going to continue to grow at the rate that it was growing in the nursery without hesitation. And here's a weeping cherry, containerized, and some for pink magnolia, saucer magnolia on the right, containerized. And the upper left is a star magnolia that's containerized. Then you can see the smaller shrubs, also the PJM, rhododendron, and the forsythia, yellow forsythia, that is also growing in containers. So the one thing they will, if they are in the container too long, they'll become root bound. As you can see, in this picture here. So this is one of those 30-gallon pots, one of those trees. We pulled it out of the pot to show the root system. So what we'll do is we'll just take our hand pruners and we'll cut these thick roots. So where we cut it, it'll start growing out instead of around. Because eventually, if you don't root prune these, it'll just continue growing in a circle, and it could cause some girdling of the root system down the road. So you want to make sure that you do cut those big roots. Then also, you're going to cut an X across the bottom of the root ball and 4 vertical slices, because that will also space out the root zone in the roots. You can see in this diagram, you want to plant that 3 to 4 times wider than the container. You want to slope the sides and make sure that that root flare is slightly above ground level. And here's one we planted in a sandy loam. Now this tree is going to take right off. So it is staked. It's a rubber strap that's on there that will give as the tree grows. You really only need to stake the trees for a year or 2, and then after that you remove them. Here's some standard bird's nest spruce growing in containers. And what I mean by standard, so if you ever hear anybody mention, well, that's a standard. So what a standard is, it's a blue spruce shrub that is grafted onto the stem of a blue spruce tree. And you really can't see the graft in this picture, but it's right where the shrub meets the stem. It's grafted, and it takes hold and grows that way. So most standards are shrubs that are grafted on top of stalks of the same species, but a different variety. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about bare root. So bare root, you can see everything you're getting in the root system. You can see here, this was a Katsura that we're planting. Bare root has to be planted dormant. This was Arbor Day, I think 4 or 5 years ago. And don't forget, Arbor Day is Friday this week, day after Earth Day. And of course, it'll be snowing or cold, which it has the last 7 of the 9 Arbor Days. But yeah, so we dig our hole. So for bare root, you want to make sure you dig a decent sized hole, enough to accommodate to spread out that root system. Bare root trees come in bundles. This is the nursery, the pot and pot container nursery. They bring all their stuff bare root and pot everything up themselves. As soon as the bare root comes in, they'll put them in their barn, cover them with straw and a tarp, keep the root systems wet till they're able to pot them up. You don't want to wait too long. You have to do it during the dormant stage, because once they start to break bud, you're in a danger zone. So the process of planting bare root, I put a half of a cubic yard into the hole, and then I'll mix up the native dirt with the half a cubic yard of peat moss, just to add a little more organic soil and a little easier, so to say, growing soil for these roots to penetrate. So again, put the plywood down, so you have a nice clean site. And then once I have my soil mixed, I'll put the tree in the hole and I'll stake it, and I'll get it squared up there. Then I'll backfill, and as I'm backfilling, I'm slightly tamping with the back of my shovel to make sure that we don't have any air pockets in there. And all the air pockets will be eliminated when you water. The water will displace the soil into the air pockets. And a little bit about tree and shrub placement. And again, it goes back to the plant label. This is a weeping snow fountain cherry, perfect spot for it. It's got plenty of room to cascade and grow and fill in. This is a flowering crab. And the other thing is, now if you're planting in a front yard, you want to call UFPO, which is Utilities Finding, can't remember what the P&O something organization. So what they'll do at no charge, they'll come out and they will mark where your gas line is and where your water line is. So when we planted this flowering crab in the front lawn, we just want to make sure we weren't planting it over any gas line or water line. You can see they marked in the road in yellow where the gas line came in, and then where the water line came in, that's the blue flag just slightly behind me. So we're plenty far away from all the utilities. And like I said, I think this was in 2008, and that was an hour ago. No, I'm sorry, about 2 hours ago. I went up and took a picture of it. It's right up the street from where I live. But, I knew, and that's mature. That tree is not going to get any bigger. Flowering crabs go anywhere from 15 to 21 feet or even smaller. There's 534 varieties of flowering crab trees, from dwarf to medium size, to weeping to columnar. So there is one that will fit your specific location to where you don't have to prune it. Just put the right tree in the right place, research, the area that you have to grow in your growing space, so to say, and just pick the proper plant. So, and this tree has never been pruned. So we did some structural pruning when it was younger, and then just let it grow. So the first tree was a radiant flowering crab, which is a pink flower, and then the one in the foreground here is a snowdrift, which is a white flower, and that one has never been pruned either. And that's pretty much not going to get any bigger. It's not going to encroach further on the power lines, and it gives this home some nice separation from the main road. This is 12B that goes through the village of Clinton. So this gives these people some nice actual sound barrier also when it's in full leaf, and a nice visual barrier to separate their home from the busy road. This is during the dormant stage, but this is called a coral burst flowering crab, which is a dwarf. This flowering crab will get no wider than the width of the green shutters, and it'll get no taller than the middle of the top window pane. So again, if you do your research, once you put a tree in, maybe a little structural pruning, and we'll have no maintenance. This is a standard Miss Kim Lilac, which again is a dwarf, and was grafted onto a lilac tree stem. And again, that will grow as wide as the window and about up to the middle part. So you wouldn't, and I've seen it a million times, people would put a radiant crab in front of this window at this size that they bought at a nursery, but they didn't realize that that radiant crab grows to 15 feet. So the next thing you know, you have to prune it, cut it, or eventually remove it. It'll end up rubbing against the siding, and you'll have no airflow behind between the house and the tree, which can cause some mold and mildew because the moisture is held back there. So again, just evaluate your site and pick the proper tree. This is a sugar maple. So this is in the large category of trees. So if you have a big backyard, say your property is half an acre, don't plant this in the front yard. Plant it in the back corner where it'll frame the backyard and not encroach on the home or the front yard, or visually when you pull out of your driveway. You don't want it to, you want it to frame the property, enhance the property. And this is in the medium tree category. This is a flowering Coosa dogwood, and this is grown here in the village of Clinton and the Village Green. I think this is the 4th year that it was in the ground, but flowers nicely, perfect for that spot, and add some nice color to the Village Green. So some native tree species that are easily attainable at most nurseries in our area: red oak, sugar maple, American linden, river birch, swamp white oak, and red maple. So Aspinall's nursery down in Chittenango, off of Route 5, has a wide variety of native trees, and they're grown right on the property. I think George has about 150 acres, 200 acres there. So they're growing all their trees right in our backyard. So chances are they're going to be well adapted to our region. I know there's some nurseries that bring in their stock from Pennsylvania, Ohio. So for me personally, I'd like to have it grown in my backyard, so to say. So I know it's well adapted to our winter climate and our microenvironment in central New York. So on the left, that's a mature Norway spruce. So that tree is about 110 feet tall, and I've seen people plant them behind their garage. So just know, if you want to plant Norway spruce, give it room to grow. And next to the Norway is a Canadian hemlock. Hemlocks, they'll get up there, and so again, not a good foundation plant. And to the right of that is a blue spruce that is slowly getting overtaken by needle cast disease. So I know most people love the blue spruce. They love the color, the needles, but blue spruce is a disease called needle cast of spruce, and you can look that up. And if any of the listeners, if you have a blue spruce on your property and it's starting to thin from the bottom up, there's a 99% chance that it has the needle cast disease, which is basically a slow death. You can treat it to slow it down. I heard about it about 20 years ago at a conference, and I haven't planted a blue spruce since then. I'll plant white fir, Abies concolor fir, which is a white fir, looks like a spruce, has a softer needle, has a nice scent to it. You do have to protect it the first few years while you have them in, because the deer do like to browse them, because it is a soft needled evergreen. But there are some that you can put in the landscape that are similar to the color and shape of the blue spruce. But yeah, just be aware of that needle cast of spruce. This is another variety of flowering crab. This is one that I've maintained. I don't think I've pruned a branch off of it in probably 7 years. So it's pretty much mature. It's not going to get any bigger. It has a broad, somewhat weeping form, pink leaf, or pink flower, excuse me. It'd be pretty cool if I had a pink leaf. But pink flower in the spring, and just a beautiful growth habit. This is a Japanese tree lilac. It's the last of the lilacs to bloom. Again, this is a medium tree that you could put in your front lawn, offset on one side of the yard or the other, and use it to frame your home. You know, I wouldn't recommend planting it directly in the center of the front lawn. So, you know, in landscape design, you want to plant and design to where your eye is drawn from high to low to your front door. So you put your taller trees on the edge, your somewhat larger shrubs towards the middle, and then your smaller shrubs towards the entryway. So this way, aesthetically, your eye is drawn to the front door instead of being impeded by a Japanese flowering lilac. But again, very few insect diseases, but very nice medium-sized tree. This is Eastern Redbud. Again, no insect, no disease problems. They're just getting ready to bloom. I took this 2 days ago. They're in bloom in New York City already. But my daughter sent me a picture that one of her friends had posted on Instagram and said, "My favorite, weirdest tree. For the love of me, I don't know what it is." So of course, my daughter shoots me a text, "Hey Dad, you know, what kind of tree is this?" I'm like, "Oh, it's the Eastern Redbud." So her friend was very happy that the mystery tree was identified. But yeah, they're in full bloom in New York right now. This is the blooms of a red maple. Few people realize that maple trees do flower, but the flower is so small that it's really inconspicuous. But maple trees do flower. Sugar maples have a yellow flower, real tiny. We were just up in the Adirondacks this past weekend, and all the red maples. So if you look into the mountains, there's like a reddish hue to them, and it's all the red maple flowers. It's slight, but you can definitely see it. And then this is another Eastern Redbud. This is a mature redbud. It's not going to get any bigger than that. So again, a medium-sized lawn tree. You can see where they put it on the fringe of the property is to not impede the view of the home. I talk a little bit about some native shrubs. Winterberry has red berries in the winter for winter attraction. Red twig dogwood, again, is a great shrub to plant in the landscape. The red twigs against the white snow in the winter. High bush blueberry, which is a wild blueberry, which is really more for birds and small animals to eat. They're not very meaty. Bayberry, which has a nice scent. And it's also, the leaves are the bay leaf that you'll put in your tomato sauces. There's a variety of viburnums that are all native, wide variety to choose from. And serviceberry, also known as amelanchier or shadblow, is another native flowering. And just for an FYI, the flower on the right is bloodroot, which will flower in the snow. But when I took this 2 weeks ago up in the Barneville area, all the snow was gone, but these were in full bloom. Butterfly bush is another native. There's a ton of variety. This one's called Lo and Behold. It's a low growing butterfly bush. Every year they're coming out with different varieties of butterfly bush. And I really like planting them in the landscape. They've got a lot going for them. One, they bloom from early summer to the frost. Obviously, they attract butterflies, and the deer won't eat them, which is a huge bonus in this neck of the woods. This one's called Miss Molly, which has like a raspberry colored flower. This is one of my own flowering crabs that grows along my driveway that divides the neighbors. And that's a mature size. That tree is not going to get any bigger. But that tree, what used to be in this spot was a huge sugar maple. Before I had purchased the house, and I lived a couple of doors down, and it was loaded with decay. The trunk was rotted, and I kept telling the homeowner, you've got to take that sugar maple down, because there was kids on both sides. This fence wasn't there at the time, and it was a shared driveway. Kids all over the place and cars parked, and she wouldn't take it down. She loved the tree. Then a huge limb came off and crushed her car, and the insurance company paid the claim on the car, but they told her that she'd have to remove the tree or they were going to drop her homeowner's insurance. And so she had the tree taken down. Before she had it taken down, she took a picture of the tree, laminated it, and put it on the fence. So she really loved that tree. But I'm a tree hugger too, but when they're hazardous and human life or physical properties involved, that takes precedence for sure. And I always have to, interject on mulching. Mulching is probably one of the most abused techniques in modern day landscaping. This is a dyed black hardwood mulch, has no bark in it. So what happens is that this mulch will never break down because wood takes longer to break. Wood chips take longer to break down than bark, and it's a dyed material. I just don't care for it. I use a double hammer milled hemlock bark that has very little wood in it. That breaks down within a couple of years. I'll mulch every other year, and the worms love it as it breaks down. They'll come and feed on it, aerate the soil, leave their castings behind. So there's a lot of good going on with natural bark mulch, but it has to be the double hammer milled fine mulch, like nuggets and things of that nature really don't break down either. But the fine natural mulch, they do sell it in Agway in bags. It's called the blue bag. If you ever go over there, they do have some dyed stuff. I think it's they have natural cypress. I think it's a yellow bag. The dyed stuff is in the black bag. The natural stuff is in the blue bags. But and buying it by the bag at Agway, it's about the same cost if you were to buy a bulk by the yard. But you can see here they've got the mulch, way up too high on the trunk of the tree. We ended up digging this tree out, and when I dug the tree out, the roots were growing in the mulch because it was a heavy clay soil. So roots are going to take the easiest path. So the easiest place to grow was in the mulch instead of the heavy clay. So literally one scoop with my little backhoe, and it was a flat root system that never made it down into the clay soil. And this was in a development in Hartford. New developments, obviously, they run over them with a bulldozer, they compact the soil, and not a good situation for growing trees. Then compound it with, putting a volcano mulch ring around it. So the tree never really prospered. And trees are resilient. This was a tree, a hemlock, that I came across hiking in the Adirondacks. And, you know, it probably started out like this, you know, and it just had enough organic matter in the crack of that rock, held enough water to sustain life, and just, you know, grew and grew the roots over the sides, so they finally anchored in the ground, and it's healthy. So like I said, trees are very resilient. They just need our help in the modern landscape to help them succeed. And then here's just a little tree humor. You should cedar ring magnolia got for her birthday. You never pine over me like that, and it's not okay. In fact, it makes me sycamore. Birch, birch, birch. So there's my little tree humor for you. And that's the end of the presentation. So I guess I can
Thank you,
take
Mike.
some questions.
Yes, and if you
Okay,
could
people heard me.
put your questions in the Q&A.
So I open the Q&A, Holly? Okay.
Let's see. We have Irene is raised her hand. Would you, let's see, be able to type it right in the Q&A, Irene?
Now, can they talk directly to me, Holly, if they opened up their microphone?
I don't think so.
Okay.
That's why it's a webinar, because normally we have more than 50 people.
Oh, gotcha.
So I'm not seeing anything, Holly, in the question and answer. Can they put it maybe in the chat?
Yeah, you could put it in the chat too.
Oh, there are. Oh, here's one here.
Do you see it, Mike? I'm not seeing. Oh, here's one. I see.
Yep.
Okay.
It says, what fruit trees prosper in our area?
Okay.
So that's a good question. So pears will do well, but they need to be protected by that, not planted in a wide open exposed area. Of course, apple trees do well. Plums are sketchy. They're borderline zone 5. The same with cherries. They're border on zone 5. So I remember maybe it was 15 years ago, we had a very severe -30 for about a week. And actually, I think it was someone who had called the extension that their mature cherry tree had died. And so I fielded the call. I went out and looked at it. And what happens is, so when it dips to -30 in a zone 5 plant that is only used to -20, the cells will freeze in the tree, causing it to die. So you just want to make sure, I guess the most success you would have on fruit trees would be apple trees. Though I do have a friend who has a peach. It puts out fruit every other year, but it's in a protected area close to the house, close to the foundation. But yeah, if you really want to have success, plant apples and make sure on the varieties and the so you do a good cross pollination.
Thank you, Mike. And we have another question here.
Yeah, so quince does grow very well. Quince is planted as an ornamental, and the bonus is that you get the fruit. Unfortunately, some people I've seen in this area don't know how to prune it, and they'll shear it, which is not really what you want. You want it to be opened and let it grow to its natural size. But yeah, you can definitely grow quince. Hazelnuts, I don't think so. I think they're more of like a zone 7 or 8. I can't really speak on, so I don't want to speculate, but I know for sure Quince can, yes.
And we could look up more info about the hazelnut cat if you email us, and we'll look it up tomorrow and then email you back.
Yeah, and I think a hazelnut is a tree nut.
Yes.
So let me see. I can look that up real quick right here, Holly.
Okay.
I'll just go to my DUR manual. My DUR manual right here. The old trusty Manual of Woody Landscape Plants by Michael Durr. Go to my common names. I'm sure people have done it already on Google, but sometimes it's nice to have a book in your hand. So scientific name index. Okay. So H.A. Hazel. I'm sure they're saying which hazel. Let's see, 281 is the only thing under hazel. So Turkish filbert or hazel is what I have, and it's hardiness zone 4 to 7. So fruit, it does have a nut. It's about 1.5 to 2 inches long. Nuts are closely grouped, 3 or more together. Fimbricated twice the length of the nut. So yeah, I mean, this is a Turkish filbert or hazel. So I guess you can grow them. It says to zone 4, between 4 and 7. So see, landscape value, excellent formal character, possibly for lawn, street tree use, also city conditions where maples exhibit scorch. This tree is so green and vigorous, little used and underappreciated tree in the United States, occasionally found in arboreta and campus settings, always distinct because of unique outline, heavy textured leaves, fruit, and bark. Difficult to locate in commerce, but worth the hunt. Has not performed well in Wichita, Kansas. Highly rated for street tree use in Germany. But I have to question why you would plant it as a street tree with all the litter from the nuts and the catkins, falling on the sidewalk. But yeah, there you have it.
Thank you, Mike. And you have another questions.
Okay.
I have noticed so many dead trees recently everywhere. Is there a disease happening?
So this time of year, obviously things are just starting to bud. And there is a disease, the needle cast that we spoke of the spruce. And then just, some trees will age out. There is no real epidemic, so to say, going on. But, and some trees are late to leaf out. I know tamarack is one of the last to put its leaf out. Beech, birch are the last to leaf out. So if you're seeing trees, 4 weeks from now with no leaves, chances are they hadn't made it through the winter.
And Mike, there's also maple decline and also the emerald ash borer too that is around.
Yeah, and the emerald ash borer really hasn't taken a real fall swoop over our area to where they're all just dying off. It's been spotty. so to say. But yeah, emerald ash borer, it's going to kill mostly all the white ash trees in the area. So, word to the wise, if you do have a live ash tree, again, I'm a tree hugger. I don't, like cutting trees down, but if I have them on my property, I'm going to take them down while they still have value, because eventually they are going to fail. But if you can take it down now, harvest the wood, repurpose it for furniture or even firewood, ash is one of the few trees that you can cut it today and burn it tomorrow, because it has a very low moisture content. And with that being said, when all these ash die from the emerald ash borer, they were going to decay and fall within a year's time. Whereas the elm trees, high moisture, very dense wood, a dead elm could stand for years without falling. But that's the big concern with this white ash decline from the emerald ash borer, is you're going to have a lot of dead trees along the highways that the counties really don't have, the budgets to take them down. But once they're dead, within 12 months, they'll be falling. So, yeah, I would harvest any ash that you have. I mean, there are some treatments you can do for them. I'm really not a fan of the treatment because it's a Band-Aid and they're very expensive. I think it's, for an average size ash tree, the treatment's like about $500 and it's good for like 2 years.
So I have some experience there, Mike. I can share on it. We did 2 of our trees. It was a little over $300, and they were very healthy ash trees. But also, I want to just poke in there and say that the DEC would want to know if you have any ash trees that make it out the other end of this emerald ash borer, because what they would like to do is see what the reason is. It's sort of like a person that survives a plague,
Right.
But I mean, along the highway, along the thruway, and in Madison County, I can speak, we have a lot of dead ash trees here on our own property. Probably a little under 50% of our trees in the woods are going down. They're ash trees.
Yeah, like I said, if you can harvest them now for firewood or even, lumber. Lumber's through the roof right now. You got a hot commodity. They were paying, before the pandemic, they were paying top dollar for ash because of the emerald ash borer. Baseball bats are made out of ash.
They kind of make a mess inside the tree.
Yeah, so baseball ash is a very, like all of your axe handles and shovel handles and baseball bats, because it's very hard and it doesn't splinter. So I think it was Spalding or Rawlings, one of those companies, they've been testing different maples, hardwood maples, for baseball bats. And what they're finding is they're splintering. And of course, that can be, you're swinging at 100-mile-an-hour fastball and that it's literally cracking your bat in half because the wood just isn't hard enough. I know they were paying top dollar a few years ago for ash trees. So, but
thanks, Mike. And then about the maple decline, people do call often about that at our office, and you see many maples with limbs dying, and so that's, and they're not sure exactly why maple decline.
Yeah, and a lot of maple decline is age related, so to say. So a lot of the soft maples grow fast. They kind of like live hard, die fast. They're a quick growing tree, which means, they're putting out a lot of energy into growth and then, have spent energy in the end, and that's when they'll start to decline. So.
Thank you, Mike. And we also have, thank you, very informative and good photos. And then here's another question. Any advice for growing apple trees on your property?
Just, get a hardy variety, space them accordingly to variety. and start out with good branch structure when they're young, and it doesn't hurt to give them some fertilizer spikes when they're younger, and kind of keep them off the hilltops, where you got direct wind during the winter, and yeah, you should have, in a lot of these nurseries, the bigger nurseries are carrying fruit trees, so they are readily available.
Remember, the deer love them too, so you want to put
Yeah, well, that's
protect them a little.
you protect them a little bit the first few years, and then once they get above the browse line, they're good to go.
Okay, let's see. Do we have any more questions?
There was something there about someone came in late and they wanted to know if they could listen to this later. Yes, we will be uploading this to our YouTube page tomorrow. So if you go to cceoneida.com, go down to the bottom of the home web page, there's a YouTube icon there, and you hit that and look for the Master Gardener videos, and you'll find it under there tomorrow, later in the day.
All right.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any other questions. Well, thank you, Mike, for.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks everybody for joining.
And we will have some classes coming up in May. One on lavender, growing lavender, another one on growing hostas too.
Yeah,
right,
they should be great.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Good night, everybody.
And thank you, everyone, for coming on.
All right, take care.